Hey, Rick Sayes here. Welcome to Season 4 of the Outdoor Biz podcast, recording here at the subterranean Rimrock Studios outside of Bishop, California. I have another great season of interviews with retailers, brand managers, executives, athletes, and others in the outdoor biz to share their stories, tips, advice, productivity tricks, and hacks you can use to take your career or business to the next level. Today's podcast is brought to you by Creative Live. Start learning for free today with their amazing selection of on-air classes. With over 1,500 curated classes in photography and video, money and life, craft and maker, art and design, and music and audio, there is something for everyone. I've watched many of their on-air broadcasts for free, or buy a class and own the content for life. Go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/creative-live and start building creative skills from the world's top experts today. Welcome to episode 147 of the Outdoor Biz podcast. I'm excited to be speaking with Sally McCoy today. Sally talks about growing up outside Charlotte, North Carolina, spending weekends on her great aunts, uncles, and grandfather's farms, and most summers in the mountains near Asheville. She went on her first backpacking trip at 5 years old on the Appalachian Trail. We talk about a career in the outdoor biz and plenty more. Thanks for the time, Sally. Hey, Sally, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, good to catch up with you. It's been a while chasing you down. You've had a lot going on this last few months.
Yeah, I keep a varied schedule.
That's good.
I also don't like to talk about myself. So.
Keeps you busy. So let's start with your first exposure to the outdoors. How did you get excited about the outdoors?
Well, I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, back when it was not nearly the size of the city it is now. And all my great aunts and great uncles and grandfather had farms. And so we would spend part of every weekend out at one of these farms, and then in the summers in the mountains, actually near Asheville. So I almost grew up outside, but I went on my first backpacking trip when I was 5, a 10-mile trip. I think my parents were crazy on the Appalachian Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains, an overnight trip, and so I was sort of hooked from then on.
Very cool. You know, it's amazing how many folks I've had on the show from that Asheville area. There's a lot of outdoor stuff that goes on there. That's cool.
Oh, North Carolina's got incredible, everything from the beaches to the mountains to some great, small scale, but great climbing.
Yeah.
And great river running as well.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And what was your first outdoor job? Did you work retail, or how'd you get into the outdoor business side of it?
Well, it depends where you draw that line. I graduated from college, and I couldn't get a job anywhere, so I wanted to work for the Nature Conservancy, and it was a kind of a recession when I graduated, so I ended up working trail for SCA and Student Conservation Association, building trail in Arkansas, and leading a crew of high schoolers. And then I worked UPS, which I still consider my best logistics background, because I was on one of the trucks at Christmas time. And then I went one of those Pan Am tickets around the world and finally got into the industry. I worked a Christmas job doing back room stuff at Orvis in San Francisco. And then finally, after pounding the pavement and asking everybody in the industry for a job, I finally got an entry-level job at North 6 months later.
Oh, wow, cool. So you grew up a little retail, a little logistics. I bet that was an interesting experience working a UPS truck at Christmas.
Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. I got some funny stories from that. But, you'd walk 15 miles a day, and they monitored everything, the efficiency of everything.
Wow.
It actually was a very good background. It was. And then, of course, Orvis at Christmas, I didn't even merit getting out on the floor. So,
I'll bet. Kept you hopping. And you've been quite the adventure. So I didn't know you did the around-the-world trip. What are a couple of your favorite adventures?
Well, I've been blessed to have so many adventures, meaning turned out well or didn't.
Yeah, right. Or maybe favorite places, somewhere you'd want to go back to, or.
Well, when I went around the world, it was a ticket that in those days, and you might remember it. You could either pick. You had to go around the world one direction, and you could have as many stops as you wanted. Mm-hmm. You just could never go backwards even a mile. And at the time, so that was '83. I got in Turkey. I spent a bunch of time in India and Nepal, and
Wow.
Thailand is sort of undiscovered then and really a paradise. But I got into China right when they went from 3 cities to 27.
Wow.
And that was extraordinary. I didn't speak Chinese and didn't know how to get on the right train, and ended up in all these places I wasn't supposed to be. And climbed Ome Shan, which is a Buddhist holy mountain in Sichuan, in the middle of this sort of festival. And that was very exotic and wild, and eventually got my wallet stolen and had to crawl out of China.
Wow.
But I have pictures of bound feet and all kinds of stuff from that era. It was really, I've never seen and of course my work has taken me back to China many, many times. And so my lens on it was definitely broadened from that trip.
Have you revisited? Have you been able to revisit any of those places, or through work? Probably not. It's a totally different environment you're going to.
Totally different environment. I've been to several of the, obviously all the big cities, but not I haven't been back to the more remote areas that I got to.
Gotcha.
But I have followed. Everything is so much. That country, talk about change in the last 40 years, is extraordinary.
Yeah, they're going through some of the same things we're going through environmentally, and they're under more pressure almost, because if they don't fix it, they will, it'll impact them in a bigger way. The population's so huge.
Yeah, and I think I do think the Olympics probably going there in the U.S. Hosting the particulate parts per billion air pollution measurements in Beijing did have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think China is I've been in some factories that recycle absolutely everything. And I've also seen horrible desecration there.
Yeah.
So it's certainly more extreme in this country, and also, but I do feel a little optimistic about the seriousness of how they're approaching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're doing some pretty amazing things. Do you have a most epic adventure of all the places you've done? Anything that, everything that could go wrong did go wrong kind of thing?
Well, I think probably Everest qualifies as the most epic. I was on an Everest climb in 1987. No American woman had summited, and we were unsuccessful, but that was a post-monsoon time frame, and we now know May is your best window. But at the time, you're 3 weeks out of any letter of contact, forget any sort of electronic communication. And I'd been to Nepal and was familiar with all that before, but it was, I came back. I think I took 9 loads through the ice fall, which no one does now. And
wow.
I came down and, my friend Modi, one of the Sherpas on our climb, was in the ice fall muttering, and I was climbing down by myself and found him, and then looked beyond him, and the whole ice fall had collapsed for about 200 yards, and he had just missed it. And he's like, yes, Ellie, it was almost namaste for me.
Wow.
And I'm like, I got it, Modi. Let's get out of here. Let's get down.
Yeah.
And, of course, the fixed lines were all gone, and so we wandered down and out. And then that season, on the same day the stock market collapsed, October 19th, 1987, it was obvious to me there was a big front coming in, and the Sherpas had already told us the jet stream was in, didn't think we'd summit. And, we certainly stayed in summit position, one of our teams or another, for 2 or 3 weeks. But it was clear this storm was coming in, and most of us were in base camp. And I remember basically 36 hours of Niagara. It sounded like Niagara Falls outside the tent. You're holding down your tent and, knocking off the snow. And it killed 6 people. It killed Sherpa as low as 13,000 feet.
Jeez.
It was a devastating storm. They said the monks said the worst in 40 years. And it certainly, if people have been up high, we had a couple of folks at Advanced Base Camp who luckily made it through. The drifts were 12 feet, and we lost all of our gear up there and all the gear on the face. And I had some of my friends went back 2 years later, and they found some of my gear and brought it back to me. But that was epic.
That was epic. I can't imagine. Yeah. Holy cow. I've been fortunate in all my adventures. I've never been in a storm like that. I can't imagine. It's just got to be brutal.
It was ferocious, and then of course it was. It took us a little while to come to our senses to be like, yeah, not only do we not have the gear to make the climb, it's conditions have totally changed. And we'd already had, you already get avalanches on that route anyway, so it became way too dangerous.
Yeah, geez. Let's shift gears a little bit. You've held some leadership roles in some great brands. Can you tell us about a couple of key learnings you come away with in a couple of those experiences?
Well, hopefully I keep learning with everything I do, but I have a lot of battle scars. I tried to summarize it in a speech I did for Camber, but I do think some of it the great thing about the outdoor industry is the thing that I got into business was because I thought business could affect more of the world, and this has become a more popular, double, triple bottom lines and whatnot. But I think, whatever position you find yourself in, you do want to leave it better than you found it, very much like you do any campsite you come upon or anything else. And I think that regardless, and there's, I've seen some pretty dysfunctional companies and the variety of things that I've done too. As an individual, it's, definitely try to leave it better than you found it. And also kind of like climbing, you want to be aware of the parts that are out of your control and be realistic about, in business it tends to be capital structure if you're not an owner, or ways that the company is, what the company's real objectives are, whether they're clear, what you're trying to accomplish, and find that that's motivational. So I think understanding that and understanding your role in it, and then understanding how you can be impactful, like how you can really make a difference. And I also think that it's, what you always want to try to make work fun if you're in a position to do that. And I found that any position I was in, you could choose to, within reason, make the everyday fun. But the clearer what everybody was trying to accomplish it was better. And if you really have a bad ownership, then you should look for something else.
Makes it tough, yeah.
But I think so often we are involved with people that we really like, and I think it is, there is absolutely an obligation to do the best you can do and leave it better than you found it, but also to be aware of what you can change and not change in a job. And obviously, just like the weather, the business environment changes tremendously. It certainly changed tremendously over my career. And so continually learning and being flexible. And I think I was a history major in college, and I think it is a truism. It doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, whether Mark Twain gets credited with that. And so thinking, well, I've sort of seen this cycle before, but it's different this time.
Yeah.
And trying not to be a know-it-all and trying to be open-minded about it, but be active. I think those are things that I try to keep in mind for myself.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good. And how about a couple of accomplishments you're most proud of?
I think at the North Face, I was lucky. I was given a tremendous amount of authority in a time where, again, the capital structure was somewhat collapsing, and we were growing our sector, which was basically the wholesale line, tremendously, like 40%. Retail was hemorrhaging that money, and I didn't understand finance enough and went back and took courses so I would understand it. But we did create, that's when we worked and took the mountain jacket and the mountain bibs and, created with a team of us, did the Denali and the Lotse and a lot of the iconic pieces. And Ingrid Harshbarger did her triplex anorak, and Benita Rapp did, did Rage and Steep Tech, and it was just an incredibly gifted. I was really honored to work with a lot of those people at the North Face, and still have a lot of them as my friends. And so that part of, outerwear became ascendant during that period.
Yeah. And you guys created the things that are still there. I mean, that's some pretty amazing product that are still in the line.
So it started as ski wear was really hot then, and outerwear came back, and we made some iconic products, and we had a great time doing it. And North Face at the time, under Hap and Jack and all those executives were involved in social causes. I mean, we had the aid sale, and we had an inventory problem, but it was, it was impactful. And I think Mark Erickson, when he led the Future Q and the whole look at merchandising and where retail was going, it was incredible. It was incredible learning, but I was honored to participate, in some of those products.
Yeah.
And then I think Sphere Designs was a huge, epic turnaround. Everything was coming back in, and it was sleeping bags were flat, and tents had quality control problems, and all the hocus pocus they made was peeling.
Oy.
And we were able to really take a super unpopular stand at that point and be very focused on gender, designing for gender, and really do a full women's line that was credible. And REI supported us, thank God, because everybody else was lecturing me about how stupid that idea was. REI came on board and helped us, and between that and the women's sleeping bags and stuff, it was pretty transformative for a period there. Didn't last when they moved Sphere Designs out of California, but that was really super fun.
Yeah, but How about a couple?
And then I came.
Sorry.
Well, I'll give you one more. Camelback was also incredible people, and really, there's so much work to be done still on getting rid of single-use plastic and straws, but taking an innovative company that designed a category and really spreading that concept of it's a hydration company. It's not just a hands-free hydration company, and preserving the authenticity in all the categories of bike and outdoor while still trying to reach broader. And that was incredibly fun. So all these events, you'll see, these are all really fun things to have participated with a lot of talented people on. So
yeah, that's great. And Camelback, you got people not only to drink water out of our container, but coffee, and then the pitchers and all those things. That was pretty good run. How about any challenges you didn't see coming once you got in the business? All of a sudden, this thing came out of left field and smacked you in the head. Whoa, what are we going to do now?
Oh, I think all those are. I think
those were challenging times. All of those had challenges. Yeah.
I think you get that all the time. I mean, at Camelback, we were looking for a solution to bisphenol A in water bottles. Like, I'd never heard of BPA when I went to Camelback, and then I was like, well, God, we got to get this out. Yeah. We were within 6 weeks of figuring it out when the Today story broke. So, that was, and I will give the owners credit, they backed me. We took $1 million of product back, and we accelerated everything, and it paid out, and all that was in the middle of the economic collapse too. So, I mean, I didn't see the scale of economic collapse, but the scale of a Today Show impact on a single category was huge.
Yeah, but yeah.
And so you've got to fall back on your values and do the right thing and communicate. So, I think that was certainly one of the most vivid ones that comes to mind.
And who are some of the mentors that help you along the way through a lot of that stuff?
Well, I have tons of people that I stay in touch with on all kinds of things. Initially, I think it was people that I was like, well, I don't want to be like them, so what do I do differently? So I won't name them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it goes to show you can pretty much learn from everybody.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
Jack Gilbert was one of the first people that believed in me at North Face. He was, he was leaving North Face as I was coming in, but he introduced me to a lot of the key retailers, and Jack was very instrumental. But I've had, Ingrid Harshberger taught me a tremendous amount of design, so did Gip Mann, and Tom Lane back at the North Face, and traveling with the reps. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And everywhere I've worked, there have been people that have some expertise that I don't have. And so I don't think of it as, oh, this person's just telling you how to evolve. I think of, I learned a lot being an investment banker, and I learned a lot managing boards of PE folks. And those people obviously know way more about finance than I do, but I've also learned from operations experts and chemical engineers. And so when I think of mentors, I think of the world is full of them. And if you need direct coaching, that's a different sort of thing. But I think as long as you're open to engage with people in an honest way, you will find teachers almost everywhere. And so when people say, oh, will you be a mentor? It's like, look, I'm always working with people who are interested and it's always a mutual, we both get a lot out of it. You know, there's several folks that are younger entrepreneurs now, and I will have a dialogue with them, but it could be around specific topics. You know, I have a person that I talk to just about, you know, where they think currency is going, for instance. So my point of view is, you know, there's tons of people that can teach you a lot, and heck, I forget enough stuff that I need to relearn it frequently.
I do the same. That's a great perspective. You're right. You can learn from people in all walks of life, and it's fortunate that we've been around such great people to do that. You've also been involved in some great nonprofits. You were part of what is now the Outdoor Industry Association in its infancy. What other nonprofit things are you doing these days?
Well, the main thing I'm working on is the Outdoor Foundation. So I was involved with OAA twice, at the beginning, and then later on I was chair. And I was also involved in the Conservation Alliance, and later on I was chair. But OAA, as you know, has a government affairs component, has a sustainability component, which really, I don't think people understand how big the impact has been, because it went broadly to much bigger companies too, but that work's been very important. And then the third is not as old as the others, but the Outdoor Foundation is about 10 years old, and we're reformulating the strategic plan right now, and have hired a new executive director and are looking. Before we were funding efforts, a little bit of college folks and a lot at younger, how do we get kids outdoors and doing small granting. And we're really looking at the function of what can we do as the outdoor industry that no one else can do to bring it together and to create more of a systematic change. Because when I was growing up, a lot of the country was still rural enough that 66% of Americans consider themselves outdoors people, as quoted by the President's Commission on Americans Outdoors, published in 1986. Now that number, it hasn't been redone, but it would be less. And so obviously we believe the outdoors has tremendous benefits, you know, for health and sanity and recreation and camaraderie, and that will eventually translate to taking care of our public land. So I think it's a very American cause. I think it's a very patriotic cause, and I think I'm not a Luddite, but I would say that engagement with our world as it is also important, not only along with technology. So the question is, how do we all know that the industry is too white and isn't diverse enough, period. So in some of that, I haven't listened to all your podcasts, but I bet a lot of people had exposure with their families or with where they were growing up or something early on. So how do we enable more people to have that? So it's a very difficult policy issue. I'm learning a lot in working on it, but we'll, over the next, 2 or 3 months, you'll be hearing more, but there's 2 areas of focus. One is research. Just like OA has the research to define the economic impact of our industry, we do some participation research, but we believe it could be more robust and compelling. And then there's an area we're calling Thrive Outside, which would be taking a few test communities and using the outdoor industry money as seed money, and then attracting other monies from foundations and going to areas that take people from their local parks and build what we call a ladder of engagement, because there's a lot of local programs. There's Boys and Girls Clubs, there's Y, there's, lots of our places have lots of great programs that many of us support.
Yeah.
But they're not integrated if you're a person in that community and you don't know about them.
Mm-hmm.
So working to integrate that and measure the learnings and then share that with the local politicians and everything. So eventually this knowledge becomes spread more evenly throughout the country, and we really help leverage the monies that are out there into better outcomes.
That's
so
great.
It's a huge policy effort.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's definitely taken some time.
Yeah. Well, we'll link to those guys on the show notes so people can look and keep track of what's going on. You're right, though. There's the other thing that's going on is we've done such a good job getting everybody enthused and excited about the outdoors. We're loving it to death. It's you look at what's going on in all these parks when they're not shut down. When they're shut down, it's even worse. But when they're not shut down, there's just people and people and people. And so how do we continue to educate those folks so that they can reduce their impact and protect the land so that we can all enjoy it?
Well, we think a key is families, and we think a key begins in a lot of these, frankly, city parks. And then as you increase the experience and exposure, we can have norms about, your impact and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's family and local based. It's with trusted folks in the community, and it's a long game.
It is, yeah. It starts when you're young, right? You have to learn all those things when you're young and with your family, and then you expose them to, as you get exposed to more public lands and various broader environments, you just take those things you learned as a kid with you. That's how we all learned as kids. My grandparents taught me.
Well, you're right, and I feel like for the country it's a long game, and so as we need to make sure it's accessible in a way that works for various communities and in their turf, and then as we grow. But I think if you look at all the positive outcomes that could come from it, and of course our industry has a cachet, and if we can start it, I think other people will be interested if the model works.
Yeah.
So that's the hope.
Yeah, that's good. What outdoor activities do you still participate in? I think you were going to go skiing today or the other day, weren't you?
Yeah. I do everything in the winter mediocrely. I'm southerner, right? So I tone luck mediocrely. I alpine. I do backcountry. I'll only snowboard on powder days. Now it hurts too much to fall otherwise. So I do, and I think when my kids are out of high school, I'll probably do a little bit more Nordic touring too.
Oh, cool.
They like the adrenaline a little too much to do that at this point. But I mountain bike, and I keep debating whether I'm going to do kiteboarding is the one thing that I'm interested in trying. But I did when I left Camelback 2 weeks after I was skimboarding, which is something you should not do after 20, and fractured my ankle in 3 places. So I now decide what I'm going to do a little more carefully.
Yeah. Yep, those injuries catch up with us. I'm the same way. Do you have any suggestions or advice for folks either wanting to get into the outdoor biz or if they're already in, grow their career?
I think getting into the outdoor biz, I think that always changes. I mean, I think I've always believed in targeting the companies that interest you, figuring out what they want and how you can help fit what they want.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the most important thing. So thinking about scale, thinking about your skills. Obviously, as the digital world's become more important, what are those skills that, some of those skills we're behind it as an industry. And so some of those could be applicable. How could you bring it to a company? What's the best way in? What's your real interest? How flexible are you on where you want to live and all that? I think any aspect of it, of course, just like I had exposure at UPS and retail and everything else, I think it's good to learn about the business. But I'm always a big proponent of picking the companies that you think have something you're particularly interested in and targeting several of them. I wouldn't target one and be flexible that way. And I think if you're in with that career, I think you should make sure you're honest with yourself and getting honest feedback about what are you doing that's adding value? Because it's all about, are you adding value to the growth or the profitability or the messaging, depending upon what your company values.
Right.
Are you creating value, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you're not creating as much as you would like to, what else can you learn or do that would? Because that initiative and resourcefulness, in my experience, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, will be valuable and gets rewarded.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So I think having, I want this boss and that boss and stuff, it's more like, great, I'm pretty clear. And if you're not clear about what the problems the company faces, that may be a problem with the company. But if you can talk to the executives or the owners or whoever it is and be very clear about what, in the big picture, they're facing, and then what is it that you can do? And Rick, you've worked in so many aspects of the business. There's a lot of different areas, everything from, and I'm including finance. You could be in finance. You could be in operations. You can be in almost any area, and then say, where's it going? Mm-hmm. Where do we need to go? And provide some answers for the company and not only advance your career.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity, especially these days with, as the industry continues to grow and evolve and get more sophisticated, there's, all these positions in I'm not even sure what department is, operations maybe, but there's analytics and things that we need more of those young folks with those young digital skills to create new positions. You could come into a company that doesn't do what you do and offer to them a whole new world and create value for them and for yourself. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
But you have to be able to explain that, and I think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Because there are, it has moved so fast that it does have to be able to translate. So
yeah, you have to explain it in terms that they're going to get. You can't just go talk your tech speak and figure they're going to understand what you're talking about. They're not. Their eyes are going to glaze over.
Well, and I think the hardest thing, and I certainly plead guilty to it, I was impatient to get new challenges and new opportunities, and I think the millennials unfairly get, and we're already in Gen Z because they're graduating from college, but
right.
get labeled by, they want it tomorrow. And I think there is a business cycle, but there is it's good to have a balance of impatience and patience as you kind of look at it. But I think you should measure it by what have you done for the company? What have you really done?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Do you have any daily routines you use to keep your sanity? Do you get out every day, walk, hike, walk the dog?
I do. It's funny. When you asked me this question, I thought that I would always have one, but I guess I don't. I certainly fit things in during the day. I always get outside. I'm finding I need to actually work out now because I want to keep doing the things I'm doing, and so I've gotten more organized about that. Yeah. Our dog died somewhat tragically last year, so we're getting a new dog. So that'll keep me busy come spring. And I always read every day. There's some I absolutely always read. So I think, like a lot in the industry, when you're out traveling and stuff, I've tried to be a little more routine, but trade shows and stuff, all that gets blown away.
Exactly. Yeah, quickly.
So I'm not one of those people who gets up and has my 7-minute routine or anything.
Right. But you squeeze it in as you can. I think a lot of us do that. Those of us that travel, that's kind of the travel dictates how we do all those things because we're just always traveling. You read a lot. Do you have any favorite books or books you give as gifts?
I have some ones that I give. There's a great book written by some professors at Berkeley. I think it's called Smart Choices. It's a decision-making process. I think that's a great book if people are looking at how they should make a decision.
Oh, cool. We'll link to that in the show notes.
It's about an 8-step process, and every time I'm making a major decision, I always kind of revisit that and think that through. I think decision-making is something that should be taught. I generally am reading nonfiction and fiction at the same time. I always read one of each. I'm reading a book on the Korean War, which I've never actually studied, so I'm catching up on that. And then I'm reading this book called Overstory, and it is interesting in that so far it's a sequence of really fascinating stories that at some point I think are going to link, but they're linked through our relationship to trees. So it's an interesting, it sounds like kind of like a funny device, but I think people who like nature would like this. It's a very interesting book. And then I really enjoyed Educated from Tara Westover, her memoir, which was one of the influential books of 2018 on some of the lists. But she was raised in Idaho, base of a mountain, kind of a fundamentalist Mormon family, and it's a fascinating story.
We'll link to all those in the show notes. I'll have to check out that Overstory. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, so
cool.
I love to read. There's a few of them.
Yeah, same here. Yep. As we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners or ask of our listeners?
I think that, thanks for being in the outdoor industry or being interested in it. And I think that while it's a different era than some of the wild stories, which are true that you've heard, I think that it's very important. And I think the work that connecting all of us to the outdoors and to our own sense of adventure, I believe it's always had some importance. It certainly has an importance of a way to earn your living and create better gear to enjoy the outdoors. But I think it's an important part of the world's culture, but certainly an important part of American culture. And thanks for all the efforts.
Yeah, great, awesome. And if people want to follow up with you, what's the best ways to reach out? LinkedIn, email?
Probably
LinkedIn. Okay.
Probably LinkedIn.
Yep. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Well, Sally, thanks for the time. I appreciate you coming on the show.
All right, Rick. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk later. All right, bye-bye. All right, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sally McCoy. You can catch up with Sally on LinkedIn, and you'll find links to everything we discussed in the show notes at theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/episode/147. I would be grateful if you visit iTunes and give us a rating and review, and be sure to share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening. Today's podcast is brought to you by InMotion Hosting. I've used InMotion Hosting to host my websites for years. Rick Say's Photos blog, Stillwater's Consulting, and the Outdoor Biz podcast are all hosted with InMotion Hosting. If your New Year's resolution is to publish a blog, produce a podcast, or simply secure a domain name, go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/InMotion and sign up with them today. They make it simple and quick to get a new site up and running with easy installation tools. That's theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/InMotion. Get going today. If you want more of the Outdoor Biz podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com where you find all the episodes, show notes, and much, much more. Until next time, be sure to make time to get outside.